Greetings, citizens, and welcome to another edition of Flashpoint, a television program of issues and ideas. Flashpoint is brought to you by the Lawrence Debate Union, which is an endowed co-curricular activity at the University of Vermont that trains UVM students in the arts and skills of debating, and then also trains them to do a bunch of other public speech, communication, events, all in the idea of increasing discourse here at home and all around the world. You know, if you're interested in Flashpoint, you could go to our website, which is debate.uvm.edu, and click on the Flashpoint sign right there on that page, and it'll take you to an archive where literally dozens and dozens of Flashpoint programs are available for your on-demand viewing. My name is Alfred C. Snider. I'm the Edwin W. Lawrence Professor of Forensics at the University of Vermont, and I'll be your facilitator for this independent thinking exercise. With me for this week's program are two of our sort of regular panelists now. On my right, I have Sam Ricker, who's a Vermonter through and through. And are you familiar with Peter Frain's column in 7 Days?
I don't read
at all.
7 Days.
You don't read 7 Days.
Yeah,
Okay. Where do you think is the best place to get Vermont news?
To get Vermont news, I don't know. Channel 3 News kind of has that folksy charm with, Marcellus Parsons. So.
Okay, right, and they're actually here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And now I have Jacob Klein on my left. Jacob, you are a fairly new debater, and you're very involved with computer instruction at the University of Vermont, and I hear you help professors learn how to use their computers.
Yeah, that's my job.
What are some of the more interesting things that you teach them how to do?
I teach them how to use a new software at UVM called Blackboard, and we're switching from
What does that do?
WebCT to Blackboard. It's a online environment for classes, and professors are using it to teach classes completely online.
Can you work with live classes too, or to give them an online component? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can teach me something about it.
Sure thing.
Very good. Okay, here we are for this week's show, number 359, Kosovo Independence. Well, it's a tiny place over on the Balkan Peninsula. In fact, it's a fairly small part of the Balkan Peninsula. And even that, not all of it is really populated by Kosovars, but it seems to be having quite the effect in other places around the world and in relations between East and West, and between Europe and countries that are yet to be part of Europe, and it's in the news. So we thought we would talk about it. I think one thing that happens, though, is our viewers may not have any idea of what the heck Kosovo is. And it's a small part of the former nation of Yugoslavia, which exists over in the Balkans. And since the collapse of Yugoslavia, it's been a part of Serbia. Now, in the 12th century, when it all started, the Serbians ruled this part of the world along with Serbia, and most of the population was Serbian, and they built a lot of old famous Serbian Orthodox churches there, and so there's a lot of cultural identification between Serbs and Kosovo. In 1389, an epic battle was fought there with the Turks, where the Serbs lost, and the result is that the Turks ruled the entire Balkan Peninsula for the next 500 years, the Austrians tried to conquer it in 1689, 1690, and failed to. But then in 1912, there was a Balkan War where the newly independent country of Serbia actually conquered Kosovo from the Turks and reoccupied it. And as a result, in the Treaty of London, Treaty of London, and it went into effect in 1918, that Kosovo became a part of Serbia. But that didn't last.
No, Kosovo's been under the rule of many different regimes since then. It was a part of Greater Albania, which was controlled by the Italians during the Second World War. But then after the Second World War, in 1946, it becomes part of the Yugoslavian Federation, which is where it remains until Yugoslavia itself starts to break down into separate countries that we now see, and that occurred during the late 80s, early 1990s, the rise of Slobodan Milosevic and the persecution of the Albanians there, leads us to the current situation where we are, where there's actually there were formal talks as early as 2003 about where the future of Kosovo is heading.
And the UN had status talks to try to figure that out, but Serbia would never really agree. And then in February of 2008, they declared independence on their own. And many countries decided to recognize them, and others didn't. And it became certainly a hot issue. Do you support Kosovo independence? One of the things we talk about in terms of thinking about self-determination is how the people feel. And so how did the people feel in this situation? How the Kosovars feel?
They definitely want their independence. That's for sure.
Yeah, because they had ethnic cleansing directed against them under the Milosevic regime.
Yeah.
They would like to be.
And they feel that it's right to do it at this time because the region of Kosovo is generally occupied. It's 90% ethnic Albanian. Whether or not that is due to tradition or due to populations moving around is another issue of who actually lays claim to that land. But as it is, it's clearly the ethnic majority that wants independence. So it seems validated.
Yeah, but the Serbs are not excited about that. The Serbs see it as a part of their tradition, a part of their culture. They say it's been part of Serbia for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of sacred holy sites in Kosovo that are sacred to the Serbs, and they would never want to give that up.
Yeah, and there was just a swimmer at an international event who was wearing a shirt that said, "Kosovo is Serbia," and he was kicked out of the competition for wearing a political shirt. But then the Europeans sort of have a different feeling about it. The Europeans seem anxious to try to get this out of the way and beyond this.
Well, I mean, the Europeans as a whole don't have an opinion because, things like the EU can't ratify it. The EU said it supported it, but a bunch of member states are very much against this independence because they have independence movements of their own.
Right, like?
Well, the Basque region of Spain,
yeah.
Chechnya and Russia. I think Cyprus is also against it. But there's a few states that are strongly opposed to this.
Okay. What does it mean to be an independent nation? Can Burlington, Vermont be an independent nation? I guess I'm asking, so can anybody become an independent nation or what? And is that a good thing?
No.
Why not?
Burlington, Vermont would not make a very good country. Because
Okay.
it's interconnected, it has history with the rest of the United States. And I think to be an independent nation, you have to have your own economy, your own government, your own society. And that's what I would define a country as.
And that's been cited as one of the reasons why Kosovo shouldn't be independent because it doesn't have a stable economy or a functioning government. That those are listed as the obstacles to independence. But at the same time, that's largely due to the way they've been treated under the Serbs. So for a country to become independent and to have this right to self-determination allows it to go in any direction, good or bad. So hopefully, this is viewed as a positive change.
Well, we have this right across the border in Quebec. There are a number of Quebec separatists who believe that Quebec is a distinct society, that they have a separate language, a separate culture. They certainly have been part of Canada, but they can look upon themselves quite differently. And if a majority of them wanted independence from Canada, do you think that would justify it, or?
Well, it never happened because it split the nation in two. And its geographic location is very important.
Yeah, so it's in between.
And they're receiving tremendous amount of support from the
Yeah.
rest of the country.
But if the people say we want to be independent, is that enough? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you've got to draw the line somewhere onto how far can we subdivide a nation, and how big a group of people, you know, there's a conflict between, do we ignore some people at the greater expense of unity, or do we give everyone an independent say? And it just depends on how big of a group you're talking about. I mean, there are Vermont separatists who want a second Vermont Republic. I can kind of see that. Being from the state, I really do think it is unlike any other in the nation, but feasibly, you know, we can't be our own nation. It's
No,
silly.
it would never work.
Yeah, but we'd save half of our tax money that we currently spend on the military,
That's true.
and we'd have it for all kinds of things. Okay, but the question is, you know, just if the people decide, that's not enough. There needs to be other compelling reasons.
There needs to be international support.
Okay, there needs to be
That's a
national
big
support.
portion.
Okay, now here's the thing. Apparently, could be a really legal independent country, you need to be recognized by the UN. Okay, and the UN can't recognize Kosovo because Russia will veto it. Right, so there's no recognition of independent Kosovo. So the way the UN works has stopped the legal machinery from allowing them to be independent, and so other people, I mean, is their independence a de facto thing where they just are and they are, or does it have to be a legal entity as well? Which do you think is more important, what the people feel or the international law?
I'd probably say the international law.
Because there has to be some kind of organizing structure for determining
Well,
Yeah.
what a nation is.
I disagree. I mean, when the people want independence and they declare independence, and many countries have recognized and supported this independence, now we're just to an issue of semantics of whether it's legal or not. You know, the international bureaucracy can make, you know, a lot of things illegal when people still think that they're perfectly right. So,
But in any case, Kosovo's been independent officially, I mean unofficially, in reality for a while, with UN forces protecting them, with, you know, their own local government and everything. So the Declaration of Independence by the Kosovar politicians is their way of saying, okay, now we're making it legal, but the UN won't. Now,
Maybe the UN needs to change its policies because
Well,
it
it's
seems
Russia,
like
really.
a lot of the international community is supporting their independence, but Russia is standing in the way, and maybe they should make a change for that.
which I find to be a really unusual situation, because what the Russians do is they support the Serbs, who are their traditional Slavic brethren, and they identify with them ethnically and historically. But on the other hand, they say, well, if, you know, Kosovo can be independent, what about North Ossetia? What about Abkhazia? What about, and they talk about places along the Russian border where there are substantial Russian populations which would like to secede from countries like Georgia and Armenia. And so it seems a little disingenuous to me, because on the one hand, they support the Serbs, but if you're going to say they can be independent, then all these other places should be independent too. So is that just they can't lose that way, or how do you interpret the Russian position?
I think the Russian position is they're still trying to be the USSR. They're still trying to be in charge of this whole area, and they really shouldn't be. They should realize that these countries are independent.
Okay, let's separate the argument from Vladimir Putin then, and let's just look at the argument. If Kosovo gets to be independent, why can't a lot of other people decide that they want to be independent as well? Let's take the issue of Spain.
Well, I'd say one of the problems is in the Basque region getting its independence is that they're viewed very negatively by the Spanish government because they do commit, hostile acts. So same with the Chechen rebels in Russia. They're viewed by the state as quote unquote terrorists, but in reality, this is an ongoing revolution. And so to see Kosovo declare independence and have that be recognized, maybe that sends the message that the way they're going about it is wrong. But.
And the majority of Spain is supporting, the current government's just been re-elected, Zapatero, and he's supporting a united Spain still, so that and I believe they're not recognizing Kosovo as a result. Okay? Now, how about the Palestinians? How do you think they feel about Kosovo becoming independent?
I would think that they would support it because they want to become independent too.
Right? So it's very interesting because we don't necessarily think that, I mean, me personally, that the Basque region of Spain should necessarily be an independent country, but I probably think that Palestine ought to be an independent country. But then the Basque ETA uses violence, well, the Palestinians
They also
use violence to get it too. It's a place where there are incredible kinds of double standards.
I mean, there's one way to look at it where will this result in more death or more peace? And I think in the example of Palestine, it would create more peace to have a separate nation, and because they would get what they need. And right now, they're fighting because their needs aren't being met.
Right, and they're nothing.
Yeah.
They're an authority, right? Okay, but doesn't this just kind of? I think every step sets off another step. Let's say that the Basque region becomes independent or gets some devolved powers, and then there are various parts of Pakistan, for example, that want to become independent from Pakistan, and there are ethnic portions of India that want to. Maybe we should say, Kosovo, you can't be independent because we want to forestall all these other things from happening?
Well, suddenly all these regions, having legitimacy for becoming independent isn't a bad thing because, there's ongoing issues with places that really should be independent, like Tibet.
Yeah.
And if we renege on Kosovo after it's declared independence, it totally, destroys any movements, or any ground that is gained, in the eyes of people who want to be independent. So.
If you look at politics in the UK, there's been a powerful force called devolution, in that a lot of the powers of the central government in Great Britain have been devolved to a Scottish Parliament and a Welsh Parliament, and of course to the Northern Ireland Parliament. So a lot of that. Do you think, and it's in general terms, of course, there would be some instances where it's good and some where it would be bad. Do you think it's a good idea to have this devolution of powers from big centralized governments, or do you think that that's a dangerous thing?
I think it's a good thing. I think smaller governments are better able to meet the needs of the people who elected them and really understand the situation, within their home territory, whereas a big central government has to make compromises, and there's more political games that are played in order to get elected there, and what you can actually accomplish is diminished in a bigger government.
What do you think? Devolution, yes, no?
I don't totally understand the topic.
Right.
Devolution.
Yeah. Well, the important power should go to the lower levels of government.
Yeah.
That, right, instead of Parliament in London deciding everything, they should have a Scottish Parliament and a Welsh Parliament to decide for themselves about laws in Scotland and laws in Wales.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For example, do you think the federal government has too much power and maybe should devolve more power to the states?
Well, I mean, you see in Vermont, there's a lot of local democracy. Each town has a town meeting. And to an extent, it's really good. But on the other hand, what do people do with town meetings? They waste time. There's not a lot gets done. So a lot of people feel like it's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy. So you get more voice, but what does it really mean?
Well, and here's an interesting sort of thing. If Serbia will let Kosovo go, the European Union says we'll be more likely to take both Serbia and Kosovo into the European Union, right? So if you'll sort of let go from each other, then we'll take you into our larger family. That seems kind of like why don't they just take them both together?
Well, take them separately or take them together. I think it'd be better to take them separately because now, there's not going to be conflicts of interest within, this larger area of Serbia. And if they were admitted into the EU, would the EU's policies benefit those who really need it if they're still under if Kosovo is still under the control of the Serbs? But if you take both countries in and they get the free trade status, they get, well, not free trade, but reduced trade barriers and many other things that could help both countries. I think it'd be better to take them separately. It's in their best interest.
Yeah, I think in the long run that would equal more peace in the region because they would both be able to survive on their own independently.
But then once you become part of the EU invests a lot of money to bring your infrastructure and everything up to EU standards. And so, I mean, if we look at what's happened to East Germany, I mean, they were one of the poorest communist countries. And now their living standards are right up there with the rest of Germany, which is a complete turnaround. So yeah, I think it would be in their best interest. But it seems like a very interesting argument. If you allow independence, then we'll let you become part of us, right? You can lose independence as well. Okay, a number of countries in that part of the world are afraid of something called the Greater Albania, right? And now there's this country of Albania, but there are ethnic Albanians living in a lot of other places, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Macedonia, in other parts of Serbia, in Hungary, in Montenegro. There we go. And so that the Kosovars will then, come up with some kind of unity agreement with the Albanians, and then the Albanians will try to foment rebellion by the Albanian populations in these other parts of the. So could we have another ethnic conflict?
The formation of an Albanian
of a greater
state.
Albania that's trying to take over parts of Macedonia and parts of other countries where there are Albanians?
At this point, I couldn't see that. It
You think
seems
someone
like
would stop that?
I'm not sure if the international community would step in, but I don't think that if it would have happened, it would have. Like just because Kosovo is in that bad a place right now that if there was the power to do this, they would have already stepped in and said, we're taking control here. I don't think just because we give Kosovo a little bit more of the cake that they're going to all of a sudden erupt into this Albanian state that wants to, fight with Serbia.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think feasibly, this uprising of the Albanians and creating a greater Albania won't happen because, Kosovo's in the unique position where their Albanians are 90% of the population. But we're talking about these fragments of countries in the surrounding region who, these people have been dispersed. The amount of wars and the amount of, changing of borders within Europe leaves people scattered all over the place. What I think an independent Kosovo gives them is a place that they could call home, a place they could move to and say, we as Albanians identify this as a place that, we feel it's our right to live here. So, much
As well as Albania.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't need to join together to.
They wouldn't. They just see it. They have a homeland now, basically.
Okay. What do you think the U.S. government's policy should be about ethnic groups who are a majority in one area saying we want to become independent? Should we say no, you all stay where you are? Should we say yes, independence, or should we take a case-by-case approach?
I think we should definitely take a case-by-case approach. I personally think in Kosovo we should be pushing towards independence, and as well as in Palestine, I definitely think we should be. But I don't think across the board we can say we must support every country that wants to become independent because it's just not feasible.
Well, I mean, the U.S. could be viewed as hypocritical for denouncing an independence because we ourselves broke off, we became an independent nation.
Yep.
Just because, we've had a 200-year head start doesn't mean that we say, look, this won't work for you, but it worked for us, but you can't do it. So, we might be viewed as definitely being hypocritical.
I really think we need a case-by-case approach. I think that to the extent that you have, like in Kosovo, here are people who have had very nasty, violent ethnic conflicts with their neighbors and the people who want to rule them, Serbia. And so that's a pretty good reason why you ought to be independent. Now, I'm not sure that Vermont doesn't like George Bush. I'm not sure that's a unique enough reason why we should become a separate, or I don't want to minimize the importance of this Vermont independence thing, of course, but I mean, there have to be good reasons why it would reduce violence instead of increase, and I think that's sort of how we have to look at it. Well, okay, for the Serbians, this is really important. Totally important. They're very much into it. I've had adult Serbs and young Serbs say we would die to keep Kosovo Serbian, okay? But 10 years from now, and this is sort of my closing question to you, 10 years from now, will we see Kosovo independence as like a turning point for self-determination movements around the world, or will we say, yeah, it just happened, big deal, and then we moved on? What do you think we're likely to say 10 years from now? And of course, you know, you're fairly young, so you'll be around in 10 years to check your answers. Let's start with the Dean, Sam Ricker.
Well, unfortunately, you know, I can't remember what it was like when countries in Yugoslavia became independent in the 1990s. But the way we view it now is that, you know, that was the way it should have been, and that's the way it happened. I think this is just, you know, the last gasp of a dying Yugoslavia finally fragmenting itself. I think this is the last major breakaway, and, you know, 10 years from now, we'll just view it as that, as, you know, what should have been and what was naturally going to happen.
Okay. Jacob Klein.
I think that we're going to see it as a good step for countries gaining independence, but I don't think it's going to solve all the problems in the region. I think there's still going to be a lot of violence, even if they do separate. And I think that there's going to need to be a lot of international support invested into this area to make it work. So I'm not sure how I feel in 10 years about this, but I do think it's a good, ground for more countries becoming independent.
I see that the next 10 years as being a continuous progression of new self-determination movements all around the world. I don't know if they'll necessarily be fueled by Kosovo, because people who want to be free and want to be independent don't go, hey, Kosovo's got it, what about me? They want to feel free and independent, and they don't care about what happens to Kosovo. So I think we're going to see a continuing procession of ethnic groups wanting to be independent, but I'm not sure Kosovo will be a triggering cause. Well, thanks a lot, gents, for being on this week's Original Flashpoint. Don't forget, think for yourself.